people who have not been able to get the kind of therapy that goes back to childhood and works through those wounds, they keep repeating the same patterns. I try to have them look at the past. Who treated you like that when you were a child? When were you bullied? When did you feel less than, not appreciated? And then we open up a whole can of worms. We find out that either a mother was a narcissist or a father was an alcoholic, and there was all kinds of hell going on during their childhood, and they were the recipient of the multi-generational toxic shame.
This is episode number 649 with Joan Childs. We are going to be speaking about why we repeat toxic patterns in relationships. This is such an important topic. And Joan is a therapist, and she's got 47 years of experience. So you are not going to want to miss this episode. I am Sandy Weiner. Welcome back to Last First Date Radio, where we believe it is never too late to go on your last first date. And to support you on your journey to lasting love, I've written 3 books. My third book is Love at Last, True Stories of Falling in Love Later in Life. This is a book to inspire you if you're in a relationship, if you're not in a relationship. These are all true stories. 18 couples who found love at different stages of the later part of their lives. And I highly recommend that you read this book and learn the love lessons that help them find lasting love. You can find all of my books on Amazon for Kindle or paperback. Before I bring Joan Childs onto the podcast, I want to invite you, if you're not yet a member of my Facebook group, join us at Your Last First Date. This is a safe and sane group. It is heavily monitored, and I come on every single week and do a live video. I post tons of information. It is a supportive environment for women over 40 who want to find their last first date. So join us at Your Last First Date. And now for my guest, Joan Childs. Why do we tend to repeat toxic patterns in our relationships? Well, Joan Childs is sharing her wisdom in today's episode. She is a renowned psychotherapist, an author, and a relationship expert with over 47 years of clinical experience. As a pioneer in encounter-centered couples therapy, Joan has dedicated her career to healing fractured relationships and guiding people towards self-actualization. Her therapeutic journey has included individuals, couples, group, and family therapy. And she has certifications in transformative modalities like EMDR, hypnosis, and inner child work. Welcome to the show, Joan.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Let's first talk about the book that's being released as we speak. Do You Hate the One You Love? Can you tell us a little bit about why you wrote that book?
Well, I've been in private practice for 48 years, doing couples counseling as well as individual. And all the years I've been in practice, I never once heard a man say, I hate her. Women have no problems saying it. And what I would hear over and over was, I hate him, he's a jerk, he never listens, he's never present. When I would say to them, why are you with someone that you hate? The response from all of them over the years was, well, I really love him, but I hate when he acts that way. So I'd say to them, so you hate the man you love? Yeah, exactly, they would say. And then I said, that's going to be a great title for a book. It's very common to have oppositional feelings coexisting simultaneously. You can sometimes feel that way about your parents. Oh, I hate this. I hate my kids. But you don't really mean that you hate them. You hate some of the behaviors that you're being subjected to.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of several people I know who are married to people whose behavior is fairly despicable at times. And
Right.
And they'll say, I love him. I'm not planning to leave him, but his behavior can be abusive at times. There are people who do experience that and they stay and stay. How do you make sense of that? Like I would be out the door personally, but I know it's complicated and people have a sunk cost. They've been in the relationship a long time. They might be afraid to leave. There's lots of reasons why people stay, but what have you found? for
Well,
as some of the reasons why people stay?
that's also a loaded question. It has a loaded answer. There are some psychological reasons like codependency, a fear of being alone, a lot of anxiety about not having enough money to live by yourself. Children, of course, make a big factor. But the one thing that I want to stress in this podcast, and also I put it in the book, is that nobody should be subjected to abuse. And a lot of the abuse that women take is because they don't feel they have any options, to leave. Like I'm very much like you. I've been married and divorced with 5 kids and single mom. So, and if you're married to a person who treats you like we've just discussed, with gaslighting or being judgmental or critical or contemptuous, I mean, it's you've got to ask yourself: is this really something I want to do the rest of my life? Because if that person is not willing to deal with the behavior and find out what is the cause, whether it's a he or a she, because it's both sides. It's not just male, female, or female. There are many men that get abused. I cannot support an abusive relationship, physically or emotionally. So I try to help the person who is receiving the abuse. Why would they want to stay in something that they're not they're not being respected, they're not being heard, they're not being seen? And then when we get into it, a lot of it has to do with childhood wounds and traumas that they carry over in their selection. They're making their choices that are what Freud called repetition compulsion, the need to repeat. Alice Miller, who was a psychiatrist and wrote The Drama of the Gifted Child, she talked of the art of absurdity. But it seems to be an unconscious decision that people who have not been able to get the kind of therapy that goes back to childhood and works through those wounds, they keep repeating the same patterns. So I try to have them look at the past. Who treated you like that when you were a child? When were you bullied? When did you feel less than, not appreciated? And then we open up a whole can of worms. We find out that either a mother was a narcissist or a father was an alcoholic, and there was all kinds of hell going on during their childhood, and they were the recipient of the multi-generational toxic shame that's all they know. And so what happens, I try to explain about a relationship, a mature, healthy relationship, and having relational maturity, but in a relationship where there is a lot of toxicity and negativity, I try to tell them that the relationship doesn't live in him or her, that the relationship lives in between the two of them. And that relationship is sacred space. That space is sacred. And if it becomes polluted over time and it gets contaminated, not only would they be the recipients of a damaged or polluted relationship, but the children of the receivership receive that also. So we have to protect the whole system, not just the couple, but the whole family system.
It's so important to look at our childhood wounds, and so few people really do. Unfortunately, it was something that I learned as I got divorced, that we who grew up in unhealthy homes often don't even know where the line of normal is. We don't know what normal or healthy looks like. So I love that you are educating people as to what healthy looks like so that we can know what's possible and what we should be working towards and not putting up with.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because we have to consider it as systemic anyway. We can't just think about the couple. There are children involved, and they are the recipient of this, what the modeling of their parents are doing. So the next generation, it goes on and on until somebody breaks it. And like you said, most people don't really understand that there is a past that dictates the future, that we live in the present from the past. And if it's really toxic, if your past was toxic, you'll be sure to pick and choose people unconsciously to create that familiar feeling. It's just the way the nature of who we are. So I've been studying with a lot of people, and the last one was Heidi Schleifer. There's so many wonderful people that are contributing to
Yeah.
what I do. I mean, I'm not the only one out there that's doing it. I think that the most important thing in therapy is the relationship between the client and the therapist, more so than all the techniques and all the tricks and everything that we have in our collection of accumulation of all the CEUs we've had to take for over the years. But I find that the connection is the most important thing. And the fact that when you're younger and you didn't have a secure attachment, that is one of the chief issues in developing and maintaining unhealthy relationships.
These are all heavy topics and definitely not something we can cover fully in the time we have. But I think it's important for people, even if somebody's listening and says, "Oh, I didn't realize I had this pattern," or "I grew up in this home. Oh, I didn't realize that the people I date or I'm in relationships with are so similar," because it is unconscious and we don't realize that we are, this is our unfinished business.
Yes.
And, what you said also about the relationship between the therapist and the patient, I feel in my work as well that it's often the first person that they've trusted. It's the first person who is actually guiding them towards a better life. And when you don't grow up with guidance and you think these people were supposed to be your guides and they did a pretty bad job, and you're kind of stabbing in the dark trying to figure it out. And it's like when somebody shines the light, says, here's why this happened, here's some ways that you can help yourself. It's an incredibly empowering thing. And it creates this amazing bond between you and the person who's come to you for help.
Well, everyone out there is looking for connection, 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 connection. And if they're in a relationship where it has trauma, or whether it has abuse, whatever it is that is polluting that space between the couple, it has all of these generalizing effects. It's like a rock. If you throw it in a pond, it doesn't just go to the bottom. There's a rippling effect. So everybody in the system, the family, is going to be affected by the parents and how they model their relationship. And if you want your children to grow up and not have these kinds of difficulties in their relationships, it's a responsibility of the parents to change what's going on and to find out what they need to do to fix it. And usually it's the woman, in my experience, that will bring in their partner. And of course, it's not just in heterosexual relationships, because in gay relationships, there's one that will always be more emotionally proactive and say, we need help. We have to get somebody to help us out of this mess. Sometimes they'll get cooperation, and you need to have a cooperative partner to do this. I will not see a couple unless I get a great big fat yes, I want this to work. Because even though I'm good at what I do and I've had experience, I'm not a magician. I can't make something happen without complete cooperation from both sides. If one person says, well, I'm not sure, I won't even see them. Part of it is, trying to get them to understand what the outcome is, what kind of an outcome did they want, or otherwise they're consistently getting the same consequences without recognizing that they're part of creating the outcome.
Yeah. So let's dive a little deeper into some of the big mistakes that people make in relationships, because I think, we're talking about lack of consciousness. Let's shed some light on the mistakes people make so they can avoid them.
Well, the first thing I tell my clients is don't get between the sheets before 2 months, or I say 3 months, and they go, what? 3 months? Well, all right, then 2 months. And then I teach them. I said, you have to know what you want in a relationship. Write down the things that are important to you. Identify that everybody wants the same things. They want somebody that has their back. They want a best friend. They want somebody that's trustworthy. They want somebody that's faithful. They have a whole list, and I have them write that list. And then I'll say, how do you know that you're going to get all that? in a month or two or a couple of weeks. Because when you go between the sheets, you start projecting everything onto that other person that isn't there, and you make them into what you want them to be rather than what they really are. So I'll ask them, what do you think you need in order to know that you've got someone that's faithful, that has your back, that is your best friend, that's trustworthy? And they always understand that. And they, well, I guess I need time. I'm right, exactly. So see if you can develop some relationship that's not between the sheets, because once you do, those projections fly all over the place and you've created your fantasy rather than reality. So if you can stay, and they always get 3 months, how can you do that? Well, then just try two. you know
Right. People attach quickly and they fool themselves into thinking, I will stay unattached. I can have casual sex, no problem. And as soon as they sleep with somebody, I've had this so many times with clients,
Sure.
like, I'm totally cool. I'm just casual. And then it's like, why didn't he call? Why didn't he text?
Right.
What's going on? Oh my God, he's seeing other people. I didn't know that. So it's, so many people are afraid to take their time to really get to know someone, but you can be with somebody for 3 months and still not know them.
Of
If
course.
you're not, but so you have to get to know somebody in a specific way. And I think people are afraid to bring up topics, to bring up questions. What do you suggest people do to get to know somebody on a deeper level?
I think you hit a very significant point, and I'm glad that you did, because people are afraid to be open. They're afraid to share as if they're going to be either rejected, or they're going to be found out that something's wrong with them, or they're defective, or they're faulty. So they kind of don't know how to communicate. And if they do communicate, they don't even know how to do it effectively. I teach them the art of communication using I messages, not you, not the word should or ought to. There's a whole bunch of educational things that go into the therapeutic modalities. But I think the only way people get to know each other besides time passing is communication. And without communicating, we're not letting them know what were you like in high school, what's your favorite movie, what was your favorite book, who was your favorite character, things that are essentially a therapist will ask. Things like that, but they're very natural things. What do you like to do? Are you a homebody, or do you a social butterfly? Uh, or even making comments that I see you like football, and then elaborate on that. Who's your favorite team and why? And just learn about the person. Whatever comes out, it's much better to communicate than it is for things to happen and then you just don't know why they happened. I don't mean to be a busybody or being intrusive, and being respectful. Do you mind, telling me about this, or how do you feel about this, or how do you feel about that? And they ask you questions. Well, you know how it goes. If you
Yeah.
if people are stuck and they can't communicate, that's a sign, that there's something that's holding them back. Usually it's shame stuff that they're not even aware of.
We often blind ourselves. We don't want to see what's right in front of us. Somebody tells us something, it's so clear, and we fool ourselves. You talked about the fantasy. The fantasy is the biggest issue. It's the projection, putting all of these qualities onto a person that you barely know, opening up your body, your life to a stranger. And you would never think of opening your bank account, but you would open up your body. And I mean, some people do open their bank account, unfortunately. We have to take care of ourselves and we have to know ourselves. We have to read the manual, because if we know how we operate best and what we need to nurture ourselves, we will have the best relationships. And very few people take the time or know how to
Yes.
read the manual.
Well, that's about setting boundaries and protecting ourselves, and knowing the difference between fantasy and reality. And a lot of people say they fall in love, but they're really not in love at all. They're in love with love, and they just want to be connected. They're looking for connection,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't realize what they're doing is repeating patterns that have been unsuccessful for years. And they never ask themselves, what am I doing to perpetuate this type of behavior that's not satisfying me. And that's why most people don't really get into therapy until they're almost 40, because, the frontal lobe of the brain is not really fully developed until you're about 30 years old to begin with. And then so they never ask, what is it about me that causes the same thing? That question should be asked, because they're participating in the outcome and they're not even aware of it. They just think, well, he wasn't the right person. I haven't met the right person yet. He hasn't come, or she hasn't come into my life. They don't understand that there's a reason for that. And they really need to look at their past to understand their present.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts, like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/lastfirstdate to learn more and claim this offer. If anybody's listening now who's repeated patterns like this, who's been blinded to red flags, if you can share one first step that people can take today to start to break this pattern, what would it be?
Well, first they have to understand and know themselves, and they look at their past and recognize the behaviors that came from there that they schlepped into the here and now. And most people don't know that until you start to examine. I give them before I even see anybody in my sessions, I give them a life history questionnaire, which is very provocative, and it goes deep into their past. Who influenced you the most in your life, and what was your relationship like with your mother, your father, your siblings, blah, blah, blah. What kind of relationships you have. A lot of questions, 23 pages. So by the time they come in, I already know where I have to go with this. It saves me a whole session, even more than one session. So you have to really make a decision. It's making a choice, making a decision. Do I want to change? And change is not easy. It's kind of like you hear it all the time. The leopards never change the spots. There is a possibility of change. I wouldn't want to think that my life's work was a sham, because I've seen change. There's a wonderful gentleman out there, Robert Sapolsky, who's got every credential in the world, who doesn't believe in free will. He's got so many credentials it would take me time to even think about what they are. But I can't buy that. I think that people have to make a choice. Do I want to get better? How will it look if I did get better? How would it feel? How would I know it? What would it sound like? What would it look like? And they have to they have to consider that there might be something that they're doing that's contributing to the demise of all their choices, the unhappiness in their lives. So it takes that kind of thinking. It's saying, what can I do to improve? What am I doing that's contributing to my unhappiness? Because it's not about other people. It doesn't make you a bad person either. You just don't have the knowledge, the awareness, the self-awareness, and you're just repeating the same thing that feels familiar, that is not necessarily good for you. So it takes that moment of the aha moment. Okay, let me get some help. And it's out there, it's out there in all forms, in all ways. I mean, now it's having a therapist is like having an interior designer. It's very commonplace, and you almost need it in today's world, especially because we have a toxic world right now. We don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. And if your daughter lives in Israel, my goodness, they're under fire from all around them. So they have a very, very aware perspective of anything could happen at any time. We live in America, and up until recently, because I grew up in the 50s, I mean, it was beautiful. We lived in a bubble, We never locked our doors. We used to go roller skating in a park at night, and there was never any mugging. Nobody got raped. I mean, it was living in La La Land in Miami Beach back in the 50s, the last age of innocence. And I think that everything has changed since then, and the world today is so stressful. So it takes a real conscious effort to be able to say, I need help. I really have to take a look at this. And I really believe, and if you have stomach ache, if you have a feeling that you're sick, you go to a doctor. I mean, it's just common sense to take care of yourself. But somehow there's still that stigma with therapy, and it's kind of like you're either crazy or you're stupid. And I got to tell you, I don't see any crazy or any stupid people I've never have in 48 years. They're bright. They're eager to get better, and they want to effectuate positive change and find out what's going on. Why do these patterns keep continuing? But the light bulb has to go on somehow. I was lucky. I had a girlfriend who was in therapy. She was in analysis, and I was about 32. I was married to a gambler. I kept having children. I ended up with 5 kids. And she suggested, I think you should get some therapy. And I said, oh, I can't handle therapy. I can do this. She said, no, how's it working for you?
Yeah.
So I went, I was 32 years old with 5 kids. And I think it was the greatest investment I ever made in myself. And then after that, to go back and get my master's degree and become a therapist from that experience, from my wounds, not so much my childhood wounds. I had a wonderful childhood, thank God, because it could have been a lot worse. But how did I end up married? We never even had a deck of cards in my house. I didn't know a spade, from a heart. We didn't have any alcohol in the house except Manischewitz wine on Passover. So I never came from any of that. How did I end up with a guy that was a gambler, and really a degenerate gambler? Got us in trouble, got the family in trouble. And I went to the therapist, and that was an opening. Like, wow, it was like finding the Holy Grail for me. So I think it's important, if people want to change, they can't do it alone. It's impossible. You can't really be observant of yourself without some guidance. And therapy is the best tool that I know of to effectuating positive change. So I would suggest that if you feel like you're stuck and you keep repeating the same patterns that have been destructive, and you want more in life than you've had, I think it's time that you go to therapy and find out why you are stuck and what can you do to get unstuck. It's an investment. I've always believed if you invest in yourself, you're going to reap the benefits of it. Investing in
Absolutely.
investing
Yeah.
in the world. So I would recommend that, because, like I said, there's very few people that can make changes without getting outside reflections and questions asked to you. Well, you never thought of. People just never think of it, and so it opens up a vista that you never even recognized or knew was there. So that would be the thing. If that's your question, what do you suggest to people? Get in therapy. If you're an alcoholic, get in therapy and go to AA. If you've got childhood wounds that have affected your life, go to ACA, adult children of alcoholics, or go to Al-Anon if you're married or involved with somebody that's not in recovery, that's using. And because if they're using, they're abusing. They're not present in the relationship. You're all alone. You're not with anybody, even though there's a body there, because you're not dealing with the person. You're dealing with the addiction. So you've got to get some help, and there's help out there for everyone that wants it.
Yeah. And it's very empowering to get help. I think when people feel like it's a weakness and I'm admitting that I need support, it's the greatest strength. in
That's
the
right.
world. And then you'll have tools and you don't have to stay stuck. And I think people don't see the other side of it. You mentioned a lot of things that are important, like the shame piece as well. It can lead to addictions, but it can also lead to being afraid to even admit you have a problem because it feels so shameful. And
And
then you're not getting the help you need. So, it's time that we took shame and put it out into the light and become more vulnerable, more open to getting the support we need so that we'll have more conscious people out there who are able to have healthy relationships, because without it, it's really hard to have a healthy relationship with somebody who's unconscious.
that's exactly right. 100%. You
Yeah.
nailed it. So,
Yeah.
any other question?
So,
Or,
one last question for you, Joan, which is the question I ask everybody. What are your final words of advice for anybody who wants to go on their last first date?
on their last first date? Well, what I tell my clients, I'll share here. I mentioned the list. What do you want? What's important to you? What can you live with, and what can't you live? What can't you live with? What can you live without, and what can't you live without? They crisscross each other. So I have to make the list of what's important for them. Like we talked about a little while ago, somebody that has my back, my best friend, someone that's trustworthy, somebody that's dependable, that's honorable, certain characteristics that are important to me, values that are important to me. Make that list. And then, of course, understand that you don't know that the first date. So you have to give it time to see if those things come out. Because, like I said, everybody puts their best foot forward in the beginning. But as time goes on, you get the peel and you get to know the real person. And you're right, 3 months is not enough. It's never enough. But at least it's better than jumping into, bed the first or second week. That could be a nightmare to you. So, and also
Yeah.
it tells that person something about you, that either you're needy or that you don't really take care of yourself, or that they can pull the sheets over you, so you really have to set boundaries and be honest with them and say, I like you and I have you on a great fun tonight on this date, and I hope we can, have a second date. But you talk to them and tell them, I have certain things that are important to me that I'll be happy to share with you if you want to hear them. And one of them should be, that for me, sex is part of a healthy relationship. So I need to know if I have a healthy relationship. I'm looking for a relationship. I'd love to be in a relationship, but I want it to be a healthy one, because otherwise I don't want it. I'm not looking just to be hooked up with somebody for the sake of having a date. It's got to be somebody that I feel enhances and nourishes my life, and I would be willing to do the same thing. I think Scott Pett wrote in his book a long, long, long time ago, it was a great definition of love. He said, love is the willingness to extend yourself for the purpose of nurturing another person's spiritual growth as well as your own. I mean, it's just one sentence, but it's willing to extend yourself and to be honest with somebody, to be open with somebody, and to say, I've been in a relationship that didn't work. I don't want that to happen again. So I'm more careful. Nothing to do with you. It happens to be all about my stuff. Taking full responsibility for your thoughts and your feelings, and sharing, what works for you, knowing what will work for you. Because it's very easy to capitulate to somebody that's a charmer and you're hungry for some kind of closeness or connection, and you don't use that boundary. So I think that's really important. They know right away to respect you. And they also think of you as being intelligent, that
Yeah.
you had to really think this through. And they're very thankful that you opened up, because you can say, I've had several bad relationships, and you can tell them what they were like. I don't want to repeat performance again. I've been there, had that. I want something that, and I know what I want. And it's not, it may not be, I don't have to be with somebody that's wealthy. I mean, I'm not wealthy, I tell my clients, but I feel like I'm the richest woman in the world because I have what money can't buy, which is love, connection, a good health. I love what I do for a living. I love working with my clients. I love writing. So if you can share that kind of communication with the person that's on a first date, that you really, if you really like them. I mean, sometimes you can go on a first date and wish you didn't, but but if you feel there's something there, take it to the second date, take it to
Yeah.
the third date, the fourth date, and don't rush into into sex right away, because that will confuse both of you. And not that there's anything wrong with having sex, but everything in time.
Yes, they say fools rush in, right?
Right. Exactly.
I think about companies that don't give health insurance until you've been with them for 3 months. They need to try you out too. And
Right.
it's make sure you're not a liability. They're putting time in to train you, to see if you're a good fit for the company. They don't know that in 2 weeks. They don't
That's
know
right.
that in a month.
That's
And
right.
so, we can learn these lessons from other places, that you don't just trust based on a good feeling. You've got to really test it out. So it's great advice. Joan, tell us your website, and I'll have all the other links in the show notes.
Easy. It's joanechilds.com.
Well, thank you so much, Joan. You have shared such important information to help people break toxic relationships, get into healthy relationships, do the work. It's really important to do the work, however you're going to do it. Take that first step and do the work, because it does pay off in spades. And we're not making a reference to your ex-husband here.
Thank you for the time that you gave me to share it. I appreciate that very much.
My pleasure. And thanks everybody for listening. If you love our show, please give us a high rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And as always, here's to your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.